And a very happy Monday to you at 12:08 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show, and I am back in the state of California. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, the latest town in the East Bay of California to be the victim of a street takeover is the small town of Crockett, California, just south of Vallejo. And even though this is a new thing for them, the language surrounding these things sounds familiar.
There's a rowdy vibe in town, and I feel like it's getting worse. I feel like we're in the Wild Wild West here.
Now, is Crockett, California named after Davy or Jasmine?
I got to imagine Davy, because Crockett, California has been around for a very, very, very long time.
Well, maybe the town's founders were clairvoyant.
It's 28 miles northeast of San Francisco.
All right. I'm sure it's a beautiful city.
It's got a population of 3,000.
3,000, you say?
Yep. And now
that's not a city. That's an HOA.
I feel like we're in the Wild Wild West here.
Well, you can join Oakland on that list. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, last week, the big news was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And then after the assassination, the news became the unhinged response from those on the left on social media. And I came on the air last week and told you that in my own personal feed, and by my own personal feed, I mean the people that I follow, the people I'm friends with, the people whose posts show up on my computer screen, I saw a lot of ugliness coming from people I personally know. People I went to school with, people I used to live next to, people I used to work with. You know, the people you follow on social media. And I noticed a pattern. I noticed that among the really vile, unhinged, ugly, poisonous posts, many of them were people who work in education, healthcare, and in the public sector, people who work for the government. And I remember coming on the air saying, I wonder if that's just a me thing, or if this is something that other people are experiencing too. And then over the weekend, I saw a story in NBC News, NBC News' website, that said the following. This was the tweet that they attached along with the story. Following the death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk this week, educators across the country have found themselves facing swift termination or potential discipline after sharing opinions on social media about the killing. After that article was published, everyone and their mother started linking it and explaining their own personal experience, and apparently I'm not the only one. People are posting videos of different teachers celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and it's just one after another, after another, after another. And I got caught in that rabbit hole over the weekend when I should have been in the casino playing blackjack. But I sacrificed for you in terms of doing the show prep. Well, as it so happens, there's an outfit out there, I guess, that's compiling a list of the different people who have gotten in trouble, they've gotten suspended, they've gotten fired for celebrating the death. And it's up to, I think, 30 or 40,000 people. And the person compiling the list said the one profession that is overrepresented by a country mile are educators. People who teach in K through 12 and college professors. They are the worst offenders. And so I started looking at more of those videos. Big mistake. Big mistake. But that's what I did. And I started noticing a second pattern. The type of person teaching in a public school these days is very different from what I experienced when I was a student. When I was a student, it was primarily a second income job where you had a breadwinner who went out and made more money, and then the person who taught school in the relationship was the one who brought in the health care, the retirement, was able to get off at the same time as the kids, so there was childcare available in that particular household. And it attracted a certain type of person. It attracted a lot of moms, a lot of women whose kids were in the same public school system that they taught in. That was very common when I was a student. You had people who had a passion for whatever subject it was that they taught, where the history teachers would tell you that they went to Gettysburg on their summer vacation, and they'd show you the pictures, and guess what? You don't want to see your teacher going to Gettysburg on vacation any more than you want to see your family going to Gettysburg on vacation, but they were passionate about it, so they showed you. The science teachers would go to the zoo or the aquarium because they had a passion for science. And I guess, the PE teachers watched a ton of Susan Powter. They did whatever they do. The guys who taught, many of them were coaches, where you would have to teach a certain subject so you could be the football coach or the basketball coach or the track coach. Many of them also had kids in the school system. They dressed a certain way. They looked a certain way. They talked a certain way. They decorated their rooms a certain way. It was very common to see the same type of person over and over and over again. And generally speaking, it worked out. California used to have a pretty good public school system. And then everything went to hell. I don't know when, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I'm here to tell you it went to hell. And when you look at these videos, none of these teachers look like the people who taught me when I was a student. None of them. First of all, they're almost all ugly. And by that, I don't mean they have awful genes, but maybe they do. When I say ugly, I mean they don't look hygienic. They don't look clean. They don't look like their clothes are pressed. They have weird colors of hair. They have piercings all over the place. Some of them you can't even tell the gender. If they're posting the video from the classroom, I've seen political art and political, propaganda hanging in the classroom. I don't remember that ever happening when I was a student. If it's a history class, then okay, maybe they have the pictures of the president or something, or they have a map of the world. They would have art depicting whatever it was that you were learning about, things that were related to the subject matter. I didn't see any of that in any of these videos. I just saw whatever political axes the teacher had to grind hanging behind them. It looks to me like the profession is now attracting a very different person than it used to attract. And that's a problem, because when you look at what they're posting and you look at how they're presenting themselves and you look at how they're decorating their rooms, that's not a healthy environment for a student. That's not a healthy environment for normal coworkers. That's not a healthy environment for anyone. And I think that part of the problem is that many of these people are going to universities that are giving them totally useless degrees. What do you do if you have a degree in gender studies? You could be a teacher or you can work in HR. That's it. No one with a degree in gender studies is ever going to be asked the question, so how's the Supreme Court treating you? Not going to happen. And so what do they do when they collect these useless degrees? And they're not given the skills for anything useful. Well, they just go to the other side of the desk. Public education has become Amway with a track team. It's just recycling the same people over and over and over again. And then they use it as an opportunity to take whatever radical politics they developed at the university they attended, and that's what they pump into the heads of the kids. And that is clearly something that is going on all over the place. Now, I always knew the political leanings of the teachers I had. Many of them leaned left, but there was a certain element of church and state. where if you were teaching the multiplication tables, that didn't necessarily have to involve you thinking 9/11 was an inside job. So let's just say that many of them kept their political beliefs, especially the really boutique ones, to themselves. And that's appropriate. Because if you're teaching a child how to play the flute, or you're teaching a child how to do multiplication tables, your own personal politics are not particularly relevant to that instruction and should be left out. But clearly, the people in the industry these days do not feel that that is something that's appropriate. They're doing their own thing. And it's also clear to me that the industry is not policing itself. Industries are supposed to police themselves. Otherwise, they get a bad reputation. You notice that industries, particularly for professionals, make it very difficult to join the ranks. And they do so for a reason. If people who don't have the skills to do the job are branded as someone who's a professional in that industry, it reflects poorly on everyone. You can't be a beautician unless you have a license. You can't be a doctor unless you pass your boards. And if you're doing things you're not supposed to be doing, the other doctors want to kick you out because they don't want to be associated with that. Believe it or not, attorneys even have ethical tests they have to pass before they're admitted to the bar. And if you steal money from clients, you end up like Tom Girardi and you end up in prison. That is a big no-no. You're not allowed to do that. And if you do that, your peers blow the whistle on you. And clearly, for whatever reason, in public education, this sort of behavior is just tolerated. Now, I know they have civil service protection. I know they have public employee unions that are very powerful, and it's difficult to reprimand or fire them when they cross the line. But something's got to change because we cannot allow this to continue. You just can't. And by the way, you notice what topic wasn't even discussed in this conversation so far? The fact that no learning is going on in those classrooms anymore either. That's also a big problem. And I mentioned this last week. When I did that Q&A with The Economist on AI, one of the things that economist said is that any job that involves repetition is going to be replaced by AI. And it doesn't matter if it's white collar. It doesn't matter if it's blue collar. If you do the same thing every day, all the time, you're probably going to be replaced by a robot. Hopefully the robots don't know how to do noon to 3 because Randy and I are just as unemployable as those teachers.
More so.
That's true.
Well, you don't have any skills.
I've got a master's degree in political science.
What is that going to get you?
Nothing. And I know how to play blackjack poorly, and I know how to golf poorly. I've got that going for me. But the point is this. When that profession is phased out by AI, we have to make sure that whatever it is that ends up replacing them is not as poisonous as what we're putting out there right now. We have to fix it. And thankfully, over the weekend, I saw that Elon Musk was tweeting about this nonstop, and it appears as if Larry Ellison, who runs Oracle, is aware of it too. They're the ones that control AI. And if they recognize that this is a problem, we have to fix this. We cannot allow this to continue. We pay a fortune for public education, and this is the product that we're getting. We're paying for people who hate us, and they're teaching the kids to hate us. And that's not good. So I would start with that. But in the meantime, something's got to give at these schools. How could you operate a school without a dress code? How can you let them show up in a professional setting with purple hair and with so many piercings in their face they look like they got attacked by a stapler? How can you allow that? At what point did all standards just go out the window in that profession? But clearly it has. And I'll say this. If you're a teacher who's normal, my guess is you work in a very hostile work environment because you stand out like the blonde girl on the Munsters. Because of all the videos I watched, not one of them looked normal. Not one of them acted normal. Not one of them had an appropriate temperament for someone who works with children. So here's what I'd like to do right now at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. If you work in education, how bonkers are your coworkers? If you have a kid in school, how bonkers is your teacher's kid? I want to hear from you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to go back and listen to an episode from last week or the week before that or the week before that, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. Go back to when we did that story about the donut shop owner in Sacramento, because he puts a smile on my face.
Okay, you got glare on them. You still have donut hole.
I love him.
And on Friday, we're going on the road.
We are going to be at Pineapple Hill Saloon in Sherman Oaks this Friday from noon to 3. It's a live broadcast of the John Phillips Show. They got great food, great drinks, and a beautiful outdoor patio right there off of Van Nuys in between Moore Park and Millbank. Special guest Susan Shelley from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association will join us because the courts have made it easier to raise your taxes. Come by and sign the petition to save Prop 13. The John Phillips Show live in Sherman Oaks at the Pineapple Hill this Friday from noon to 3.
After the political assassination of Charlie Kirk, a list was compiled of those who got in trouble at work for posting inappropriate things, distasteful things, celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. On that list, educators were overrepresented. There were more educators on that list than any other profession. I want to know, from you educators out there, are your colleagues bonkers? And for those of you who have kids in the schools, how bonkers is your kid's teacher? 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Let's go to Carl in Orange. Carl, hello.
Hi, John, and hi, Randy. Yeah, I spent 40 years in the profession. I'm a retired teacher. I retired in 2006. And I can tell you right now why you have some of these people, and you talked about it earlier about the majors in college. You know, if you got a social science degree, what could you turn to as far as going into a profession? But you know, now, first of all, the pay for teachers has never been great. But I must say for myself, between what I was compensated financially, my health plan, and my retirement, it wasn't. I'd take it any day of the week, and but you know they can't find people to go into the profession because one, the cost of living, especially here, but also you know it's just they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for who they're going to hire. I mean, when I went into the profession, it was very difficult to get a job. In fact, I had to substitute for a year just to get a job. And but now they can't get people to go into the profession. And like I said earlier, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. So they're on the desperate side in a lot of ways. And then politically, I was heavily involved in the teachers union. I actually got an award from CTA for help knocking out a far-right school board here in Orange. And, you know, by the time I retired, I wanted nothing to do with them. And I know I made the right decision based on all the news I see coming from it. So that's all I have to say, guys. Thanks. You have a great show.
Thank you so much for the call, sir. I appreciate it. Let's go to Paul in San Francisco. Paul, hello.
Yes, in San Francisco, the school board president had to tell the teachers union, which is the NEA, that they couldn't proselytize the kids in class. And the NEA said, well, that's free speech. And the head of the school board had to say, you're working for the public. You're working on public property. You express your political opinions on your own time. Now, I went to a middle school here in San Francisco for a meeting, non-related to education. Anyway, there was Black Lives Matter signs in the hallways. They're proselytizing these kids.
Oh, they are. And I'll tell you something else. I mentioned it in the monologue, but I'm looking at the videos here during the breaks. At what point did the dress code go out? Because when I was a student, the male teachers typically wore collared shirts of some sort, sometimes button up, sometimes not. Some of them even wore ties. And the women wore dresses or they wore pantsuits, but whatever, they looked professional. All of the videos I've seen over the weekend and today, they look like strung out baristas.
Yes, I saw a middle school girl in my neighborhood here in San Francisco with a bare midriff. They allow that in schools now.
Well, the students, that's a different story. I was talking about the teachers, but thank you for the call,
I know
sir.
you were, but
yeah, no, there's no standards across the board. Let's go to John in Modesto. John, hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, I was listening to the other callers. It's definitely scraping the bottom. I mean, they are looking for new teachers. It's definitely cost of living that's gone into recruitment. But, I was part of the younger generation in early recruitment. I worked as a substitute for about 10 years, and then I lost the ability to teach in those final years because a lot of evaluations are based on the anti-colonization movements, the anti-privilege movements, and if you're not dressing the part, you just aren't going to get that position.
So you think they're weeding out the normal ones so they get the freaks?
I think so.
Yeah, that would explain a lot. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Rick in L.A. Rick, hello.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on. I was a teacher, high school counselor in mostly Los Angeles, inner city, for 43 years. And I've got to say that for the most part, most educators are not wackos. What we're seeing is an extreme leftist view, but it's backed by the media. That's what makes it so visible. Most of the teachers I work with were at least understanding, and believe me, I was the token conservative. So I understand what you're seeing and what we're witnessing, but I'd like to say that it's still an anomaly and not a majority.
All right, thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Jason in Northern California. Jason, hello.
I think Jason went bye-bye.
All right, let's go to Larry in Silicon Valley.
Let's go to Larry.
Yes, hello, John. Pleasure talking to you. First-time caller, long-time listener. I'm 68 years old. I grew up going to school in Cupertino, California, which is a Democrat mess anymore. But when I was in school as a child, we had to dress appropriately. We had to salute the flag. We had prayer. We were allowed to have prayer in public schools, but not a private school. It was in Cupertino School District. And we had so much respect for our teachers and so much respect for each other. It never mattered what color. We always had at least one black guy, one short Mexican guy. I'm a short white Italian guy. But anyway, there was so much respect for others through the teachers and the students, and hardly any of the students were really misbehaving at any time. They just had respect for authority. Well, my pastor, I grew up in a Christian church in San Jose, California, and our pastor, when they passed that law, it was in elementary school, probably sixth grade, no more saluting of the flag. Our pastor, who was a wonderful world-class pastor of a major church of over 1,200 people congregation at the time, and that was years ago, said, you know what, I'm sorry to tell you folks, but our education system is going to go to hell in a basket. I can't declare when. I don't know how it's going to happen, but things will never be the same. Once we take God and the saluting of the flag and the appreciation of being an American out of our schools, God is not going to bless our schools anymore. And we turn our back on God, well, this is what we got. And here I am 68 years old, and I'll tell you what, it is so real to me, the words of my pastor that told our congregation that the schools are going to go to hell in the future. And here we are 55 years later in the middle of the fire.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Hill in Marin County. Hill, hello.
Hi, John. John, my wife is a tutor in Marin County, and she was tutoring a high school boy going to school in the city. And I didn't believe it until I saw the pictures. But he has one teacher who is a woman with a beard and a second one who comes to class wearing a Black Panther tail out of her rear end. And this is a fairly expensive school. It's a private school, but nevertheless, my mouth dropped open when I saw it.
So you actually saw the pictures of these people?
Absolutely.
All right. Can we get an assist from Shang?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it. Let's go to Robert in Santa Clara. Robert, hello.
Hey, guys. I just have a lot of experiences. Like, when I take some people out to dinner and their kids, the kids are being taught in San Jose down here in the Unified. Like every darn kid, I just started doing a test when you take a bunch of people out to dinner. When you ask them about what they're learning in school, and they just being taught to hate Donald Trump, and they don't really want to teach them anything. And I'm like, what are you learning? And it's just they're all been like literally fear-mongered against Trump. It's like the most important thing. That was one example, and it's happened like 5 occurrences over the years. And then, of course, my mother was a teacher, and she was told in the teacher's room one time. She was an Italian immigrant, 21 years old. She was in the school district for years. She's 90 years old now, bless her heart. And she was taught. She was told by a Mexican guy who was gay. Not all gays are left wing, but he became a part of the teachers union. And he had a chip on his shoulder. He said it one day in the teacher's room. What goes around comes around. And I just thought about that. Why would he ever say that? My mom was so nice. She might have been kind of clueless, but I think even the ethnic grievance chip on the shoulder was even around back then, to where these people would get into power, and you have these movements where only Mexican teachers can teach Mexican kids. And, these type of thoughts that people have, these sort of microaggression, the embracing of microaggressions, and of course, it leads all the way to drag time, story hour and stuff like that. It's just stupid. The kids aren't learning any functional literacy. They used to bring my mom out to the schools to teach the kids the penmanship papers because they're all lazy. And this was back in the late 80s and 90s when my mom was ready to retire. They used to keep her on the road. We had to take her keys away. Mom, you're not going to go teach anymore, because all these teachers would take a regular sabbatical every year to get my mom to come in and teach the kids how to, dot their I's and cross their T's, because they were all phasing it out. They were too lazy to teach it. And I think it's really crippled the kids' brains.
All right.
The crime's been going on for a long time.
Thank you for the call, sir. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. NBC News has an article out saying that educators have been hit the hardest in terms of firings and suspensions after celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. I want to talk to you educators out there. How bonkers are your colleagues? And if you have a kid in school, how bonkers is your kid's teacher? 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. If we don't get to your call this hour, don't worry. As soon as we're finished with the news, we're going right back to the phones at the top of the hour. We're going to try to get to as many calls as possible. Phone lines have been jammed the entire time we've been doing this topic, so I know there's a lot of you who want to weigh in on this. Let's go to Pete in Castro Valley. Pete, hello.
Hey, John, I really have a question for you. My kid, on the third day of school this year, he came home and told me that his teacher said that the attempted assassination on President Trump was staged. It was faked by his campaign. And my son's smart enough, he kind of thought it was ridiculous. But I'm thinking, should I go to the principal and complain, or are they going to like mark my kid, as a troublemaker? Honestly, my wife doesn't want me to say anything, but I really don't know what to do.
Yeah, I don't know what you do with that, because what do you do if your kid's in a classroom where they teach them that 9/11 was an inside job? Or that the Holocaust didn't happen, or some other wild conspiracy theory that's being taught as fact?
I don't know. I don't know if any of your listeners can give me some advice. But I appreciate your time and exposing this topic. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you for the call, Sarah. Let's go to Joy in Arcadia. Joy, hello.
Hi, guys. I love your show. So I just want to say I'm a current educator in California, and it's really disheartening to see the indoctrination that's been happening over the years. I've been an educator for 20 years, and things have gotten progressively worse with courses such as ethnic studies and how they teach it to change the minds of the kids. I subbed for an ethnic studies class once, and the lesson was basically about how the freeway system in LA is racist. Don't ask me how they twisted it to be that way, but they had their points they put in. So things like that, and kids being taught about toxic masculinity and BLM and GSA up everywhere. So it really is one-sided for the most part. And if you're a conservative teacher, it's very hard to feel comfortable or like you can express any of your beliefs. We had teachers crying on campus when Trump won the election in front of the kids. And we've had staff meetings where our principal makes jokes about Trump and just everybody's laughing. And even though we're told, and there's like laws against being political in the classroom, they don't really enforce it because honestly, they agree with it. So why would they want to try to discipline anybody for doing it? And of course, there is the teachers union that makes it hard to fire anybody as well. So we have all those issues. So
well, and here's the question: as someone who's a conservative, you said you were a self-described conservative. How is it not a toxic work environment if your colleagues are publicly posting that they don't mind killing people whose views they disagree with? How is that not a textbook definition of a hostile work environment? What are you supposed to do with that person when you're in the teacher's break room, or you're supposed to collaborate with them and team teach a class when you know that they would rather have you dead?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of us just stay quiet because we don't feel like we want to even become a target. I was at a staff meeting once, and this is when people don't even know my political beliefs, and they were talking about white fragility, stuff like that. And I was the only white person in the group, and it was basically everybody ragging on white people, and I'm the only one there, but I'm supposed to be the racist one. That was really very uncomfortable for me, but that stuff happens.
Yep, I can imagine. I would not want to work under those conditions. You must feel like you're behind enemy lines every day.
Yes, and there are a few of us, though, who we know each other on campus, so we kind of just have our own little side conversations when we can. So, but yeah, it's a very tough environment to work in. But again, we don't want to abandon California. We don't want to abandon any of the conservative kids, because there are a few minority conservative kids that they also need people on campus that they feel like they can talk to. And so, if you can, start a club or things like that, where you have, maybe fair debate, or things where you can try to make a difference in little ways.
All right. Well, thank you for the call, and I appreciate what you do. Let's go to Scorpio in San Jose. Scorpio, hello.
Hey, John. Thanks for taking my call. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and she dresses normally and presents herself in a respectable way. Most of her coworkers do as well. A couple years back, one that was a little odd was talking to her, and she referred to, I guess, normal people as being breeders. So I just wanted to throw that out there, which I thought was, I don't know if it's funny or very disturbing, but that is pretty much the gist of it, what I wanted to say. And also, you nailed it in the introduction, the profile of the teachers of yesteryear. My wife's dad was an educator, mom educator. They all were normal and respectable. And now it's a different game, it seems.
Okay, here's my advice to your wife. If that teacher ever comes up to her and starts talking to her about breeders again, she should say, you know, you're not supposed to sell pit bulls.
All right, well, thank you.
All right, thank you for the call, sir. All right, if you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to more of your calls immediately after the news. 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. It's the John Phillips Show.